Hello, everybody. At this time, we are talking about the sale of goods. The sale of goods refers to the transaction where a seller transfers ownership of goods to a buyer for an agreed price. These goods can be physical items such as electronics, furniture, or raw materials. In legal terms, the sale of goods typically involves a contract that outlines the specific terms of the sale, including the price, delivery, and other responsibilities of both the buyer and the seller. The sale of goods is governed by law and regulations which help ensure that both parties fulfill their obligation under the agreement, such as providing the goods in the agreed upon condition and ensuring payment is made. And then key aspects of the sale of goods. The first aspect about title. Title refers to the legal ownership of the goods. In a sale of goods, the title passes from the seller to the buyer upon the completion of the transactions, which typically occurs when the goods are delivered and payment is made. The timing of the transfers of title is crucial because it determines who has legal ownership and the associated rights and responsibilities. The Sale of Goods Act specifies that the transfers of title can occur at different times depending on the terms of the contract. For example, in a cash sale, the title transfers when the buyer pays for and takes possession of the goods. In a credit sale, the title might transfer before full payment is made, depending on the agreement between the parties. And then second, about risk. Risk pertains to the responsibility for loss or damage to the goods. Generally, the risk follows the title, meaning that once the title has transferred to the buyer assumes the risk. However, the contract of sale can specify different arrangements for the transfers of risk. For example, if goods are sold free on board, the risk transfers to the buyer once the goods are loaded onto the shipping vessels. If the goods are sold costs, insurance, and freight, the seller retains the risk until the goods reach the buyer's port. And then third, sub-sales. Sub-sales occur when the buyer of goods resells them to a third party before taking delivery or transferring the title. The original contract of sale often includes provisions that address sub-sales, ensuring that the rights and obligations of the original seller and buyer are clear. Sub-sales can complicate the transfers of title and risk. In such cases, the original seller must be aware of the sub-sales terms and the new buyer's involvement. Ensuring clear communication and proper documentation is crucial to manage sub-sales effectively. And then we move to key principles of the Sale of Goods Act. The Sale of Goods Act 1896 is a foundational law governing the sale of goods in many jurisdictions. It establishes several key principles to ensure fairness and clarity in transactions. These include the first about transfers of title. The goods must be transferred from the seller to the buyer once the contract is effective, provided they are ready for delivery. And then second, performance requirements. If the seller must take further action like to weigh the goods, the transfers cannot occur until that action is completed. Third, about risk of loss. The risk of loss is typically transferred with the ownership of goods, but exceptions may apply depending on contract terms. The Sale of Goods Act helps ensure that both parties meet their obligations, preventing disputes over the transaction's term. And then we move to Convention on the International Sale of Goods. The Vienna Convention on the International Sale of Goods provides default rules, and then similar to those in the Sale of Goods Act for international sales. If the parties are in different countries, there is an international sale, and they can stipulate that the international rules apply. The convention has been ratified by many countries, although it has not been ratified by Ireland or the United Kingdom. However, the parties in an international sale can stipulate that their agreement will be covered by the convention, notwithstanding that it does not have the force of law domestically. And then, why is the sale of goods important? The sale of goods is one of the most common types of commercial transactions, and it is important because it facilitates trade and commerce. Understanding the legal principles behind the sale of goods helps businesses protect their rights, set clear expectations, and avoid disputes with customers or suppliers. By following proper procedures, businesses can ensure that goods are delivered as promised and that payment is made according to the terms of the contract. For businesses, clear agreements regarding the sale of goods also help in managing inventory, pricing, delivery schedules, and returns or warranties, making the process more efficient and predictable. And then we move to examples of the sale of goods in practice. To better understand the sale of goods, consider these practical examples that highlight its application in different contexts. The first, retail sale. A customer purchases a laptop from an electronics store. The sales contract specifies that the title and risk transfers to the buyer upon payment and receipt of the laptop. If the laptop is damaged after the purchase, the buyer assumes the risk. And then second, subsale in real estate. A property developer purchases land from an owner and agrees to transfer the title once full payment is made. Before completing the payment, the developer enters into a subsale agreement with a construction company. The original sale contract and subsale agreement must clearly outline the transference of title and risk to manage the interests of all parties involved. I think it is enough. Thanks for watching.